What's up, guys, and welcome to another jam-packed edition of Q&A, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get on to, and I just want to remind you guys, one, this video is dropping on a Saturday, which means you know it's time for a special coverage week, special draft coverage all week. There's going to be double videos. There might be a double video hitting your inbox tomorrow, so make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're notified, and also make sure you're subscribed and notified so you don't miss any of these extra videos I'm about to throw out, but also so you don't miss the draft live stream that I'm doing for the first 2 days of the draft. Come watch the draft with me live on this channel. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you're notified. Make sure you don't miss out. Now we got a ton of questions to get into, a pre-draft edition of Q&A, and we're just going to jump right into it. And we're going to start with the first question, which is from Nathan, who says, yo, I read an article saying that it's possible that Sheldon Richardson could return. Do you think this is possible? Yes, it is possible, but we're not going to find out till after the draft. Now, how possible this is, I think varies, right? One of the things this draft doesn't have a great deal of is defensive tackle talent. So once that becomes evident, once teams really don't get their guy at defensive tackle or their one or two guys that they want, then I think there might be a little bit of a run on Sheldon Richardson's value. And I think he's probably going to get somewhere between $8 to $10 million from another team. And if that's the case, the Browns are not going to be able to re-sign him, right? But if teams feel satisfied with what they got in the interior defensive line, then I think that does bring about a situation where Sheldon Richardson could be available at around $6 million or $7 million or somewhere along those lines where they can restructure it, void years, put in the year they're going to have to run over and do things like that. And if that's the case, then yeah, Sheldon Richardson can come back if that's the case. That's all going to depend on what the markets are like, what teams are valuing the defensive tackles that they get in the draft as, and how desperate some teams are. It can go either way. I don't want to sit here and tell Browns fans, oh yeah, it's definitely Sheldon Richardson going to be back. Because I don't think it's necessarily more than like 50% likely, but I do think there's probably about like a 30% chance that he comes back. But I also think it's more likely that he moves on and finds a team that wants to give him more of the deal that he's looking for. The next question comes from David, who says, any wide receivers you like in the first? We didn't sign anyone except for signing Hollywood. I like somebody like Elijah Moore, who can be a burner and kind of a long-term replacement for the ex-wide receiver position that Odell kind of holds on to. And especially I would like somebody who's faster, just because when Odell went out, the offense did fine, but the one thing the offense was missing was a legitimate deep threat. I talked about John Ross coming in here and filling that Brashad Perriman. I felt like they needed that deep threat on the offense, right? Not necessarily that they needed a top-tier deep threat, but they just needed one. I don't think they had one. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think his game is better as that second Z receiver instead of a X receiver. The same thing goes for Jarvis, and the same thing goes for Rashard Higgins, right? You got a lot of guys on this roster that are really good number two receivers, really good Z receivers, but not necessarily great X receivers. You only really have Odell as an X. So I think it would help them get some depth at the wide receiver position if they draft a wide receiver here, and I wouldn't be mad at it. A guy like Elijah Moore, if Rashad Bateman's there, you really have to consider it. These are the guys that you have to look out for because there's just a ton of prospects out here in this draft. I wouldn't even be surprised if like a Rondale Moore, if he fell to the Browns in the second round, if that's something that the Browns would do, because the Browns do love those end arounds. They need somebody a little bit more durable than JoJo Natson to take those end arounds, and Rondale Moore could be that guy. Didn't have a great history of durability at Purdue, but, maybe they think that he can be more healthy in the NFL than he was in college. The next question comes from Still Don't Care, who says, how do you feel about the position number change? This is like the biggest deal made out of something fun. I don't understand being against it. Like, I'm not somebody who is pounding the table, yeah, it's happened. It's cool that it has happened, right? I think it's cool to have, more people be able to expand this jersey number thing, because I think sometimes you get guys with like awkward looking jerseys and you don't really like them aesthetically, but it's cool. I like it. I like that, maybe somebody can keep their number from college, keep that branding. I like that, it's out there. It just looks aesthetically pleasing. And I don't really understand being against it. I saw like a screenshot of Tom Brady's story, and that could be fake for all I know. But I saw a screenshot of Tom Brady like mad about it. And like, I don't understand being mad about it. Like, you can't understand that dude at the defensive back position is a defensive back because his number's not 20. That don't make any sense to me. But that's cool. I just don't really see a reason to be upset about it unless like you're the type of person to be upset because guys celebrate. And if that's the case, then, I'm not really on your side on that one. I think, whatever makes the game more fun and more entertaining and gives these guys more personality always is better for the game. The next question comes from Dr. Maggie, who says, if you're the 49ers, my NFC team, which QB fits the Shanahan offense the best? The 49ers are in such a weird spot, and they traded into this weird spot, right? The guy right now, day one, which they should not be drafting day one to fit into their offense, that at least you would have the most confidence that he could know your offense and maybe run it. I don't know if he run it good, is Mac Jones. Now, y'all know where I'm at on Mac Jones. I'm not somebody who is an advocate for this whole Mac Jones in the top 10 situation, but, it's happening, whatever. The guy who is probably the best long-term fit and the guy that you would want to develop to be the fit, potentially, right, is Trey Lance. But the best quarterback prospect that's going to be available to you at 3 is obviously Justin Fields. It's by far Justin Fields, to the point to where even though Justin Fields is not a better fit at that offense than, Mac Jones, I would still think that Justin Fields would be better in that offense than Mac Jones, because I do think Justin Fields is a much better player than Mac Jones. That being said, they're in this weird spot where the best player that's going to be available there, not really a fit. The guy that's a fit, not really a top 5 pick. And, the other guy that's there is a massive project. Like Trey Lance, I like Trey Lance, but he's a project. He's a 2-3 year, well, not 2-3. Nobody's a 2-3 year project anymore. But he's definitely a year project. And if they're looking to keep Jimmy Garoppolo and have a guy sit behind him, then yeah, Trey Lance is the guy you pick, because nobody's going to be jumping for Trey Lance to start day one, because don't nobody really know who Trey Lance is. Nobody really watch North Dakota State all like that, so there's not a ton of hype on him. If you draft Justin Fields, you're going to have to play Justin Fields eventually, because everybody knows who Justin Fields is. And the Mac Jones one, that's just beyond me. But that's what I think the 49ers should do. Trey Lance, if you want to develop a guy, that makes sense. If you just want to get the best quarterback available, it's Justin Fields. And then, whatever argument there is for Mac Jones. I don't get it, but, maybe I'm wrong, and this age is like milk. But, we'll see. The next question comes from Adam, who says, what's up, Q? Your thoughts on Jason Owa and Caleb Farley, both athletic freaks. Address need on the defense. They may be a little risky because of injury history, Farley or rawness, Owa. Do you think, regarding with the 26th pick, the strategy should be high risk, high reward, or safe? Well, here's my issue with Owa, right? My issue with Owa is that, yeah, there's a high reward. There's like a bottom basement ceiling. I mean, not ceiling, but floor on the guy. But the ceiling is incredible. My issue with a guy like him is just like, if you're going to take a chance on a pass rusher, Quiddy Pay and Azeez Ojulari are just better bets, right? Like, yeah, sure, the ceiling might not be as high for Quiddy Pay and Ojulari as it is hypothetically for Owa, but the floor is much better, and it's not necessarily being safe. It's just making a smart bet, because, this guy, Owa, has like 7 sacks in his entire career at Penn State. He hasn't put it together in 3 years of college football. What are the odds that he's just going to magically put it together when the competition gets just as athletic as him? Like, I just don't like that bet. I would rather go with somebody who has proven they can play the defensive end position effectively, and they have those traits to go up. That's why I'm much higher on Azeez Ojulari and Quiddy Pay and definitely Jalen Phillips than I am on a guy like him, because they have traits, they have great ceilings, but they also have floors. And Owa has no floor. He could be out the league in 2 years. He could be the best defensive end in football. Well, now I'm not going to go that far, but maybe he could be a top 10 defensive end in football in a few years if he puts it all together. But that risk reward proposition, not really worth it to me to get somebody who might be a waste in the first round. Now, when it comes to Caleb Farley, it's all about how you feel about the back. And look, I'm not a medical expert. I have no inside sources with the Cleveland Browns. I don't want to pretend that I do. So I don't know how the medical of the Cleveland Browns are looking at Caleb Farley, and I just don't know where Caleb Farley's back is at this point. So that's why I've kind of left him out the coverage, because I just don't know what to make of him. He's a great athlete. He's somebody who, if he was healthy, would definitely be, easily top half of the first round corner, but we don't know what the medical situation is like. And let's be honest, they got bit in the butt about medical a couple of times here at the defensive back position, not through any fault of their own, just because Greedy just had injury problems magically when he fell to the second round. Same thing with Grant Delpit. And you don't really want to add another corner where you're not even sure if they're going to be able to play right away. And Caleb Farley's kind of in that boat. So you have to worry about injury histories, especially when you have a ton of injured guys or consistently injured guys in your secondary. You might want to get somebody who has a more clean injury history if you're the Cleveland Browns. The next question is from Sammy, who says, what do you think of getting rid of Case Keenum and picking a quarterback late in the draft? Person like Ian Book out of Notre Dame, he was in a very similar offense at Notre Dame. Look, here's the thing. If the Browns get rid of Case Keenum, they'll just sign like a Chase Daniel or somebody like that, right? If the money was an issue with Case Keenum, they would just sign another veteran at a cheaper number. That's where they're at with backup quarterback. I mean, Baker's still in his rookie deal, so you're not developing somebody to go in front of him. And it looks like they're going to go all the way with that. It looks like they're going to sign him to a long-term deal eventually, right? They took his fifth-year option and everything. So no, probably not going to draft a young quarterback, not in the first 5 rounds. Maybe you want to take a flyer on the guy in the 7th. Sure, I guess. But more than likely, it's going to be Case Keenum, and if it's not Case Keenum, they'll just sign some other old veteran that can be behind him. But thank you for the question, man. Next question comes from Ben Smith, who says, do you think Andrew Berry's going to trade back if there isn't a good option at the first round and get draft capital for next year, since they're building in the future mentality? Look, if he has nobody available that he has a first-round grade on, by all means, trade back, right? Like, by all means, trade back. If you don't think there's a first-rounder in that draft for somebody you covet, then all means, at 26, trade out. Trade out. You can not even just trade back. You can trade out if you want, right? Trade that first, turn it into a first next year with the team that you think might have a top 10 pick, right? I saw somebody float out there a trade with like the Texans or somebody like that, somebody who could have a top 10 pick next year, but they pick up another first rounder. So yeah, by all means, all options are available, whether they like guys there, whether they want to trade up, whether they want to trade back, all options are available. And that is the luxury of having a mostly completely built team. You're now just drafting for want or luxury. You're not really like in a dire position where you desperately need to fill a hole in the draft. Next question comes from Sherlock, who says, if one of the top 3 wide receivers falls down to 20, would you draft them without trading Odell but look into the future? And yes, another question, hopefully. I'm not going to talk about O. I'll talk about O enough in this video. No, we're not going to make him tight end 3 or anything or draft Jason O. But as far as Odell goes, right, like let's say by some miracle, Devonta Smith falls to 26, you have to take him, right? And it's not necessarily that you're going to get rid of Odell or anything, but it's just, Odell is 28. He's in the final couple years of his deal. Same thing with Jarvis. I know I don't want to see Jarvis go, but same thing with Jarvis. These are guys that are going to be, inching towards 30 in the last few years of their deal. And in Odell's case, I think he's at the part of his contract next year during the season where he'll have no dead money if he's cut, right? So he's going to be a cut candidate if he's not playing up to where his level of play should be. And yeah, you got to prepare for the future, right? If you lose Odell and you lose Jarvis in one offseason, then you just have Rashard Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones out there. That's not enough, right? So you might want to have some weapons there. And if a premium weapon like a Devonta Smith or a Kyle Pitts, by the way, ain't no way Kyle Pitts is slipping to 26, or even Jamar Chase. Like this is fantasy zone that we're talking about. But even Rashad Bateman, right? You have to consider it. And I think there's a strong argument to be made there. And I think, honestly, they're going to draft a couple wide receivers in this draft because they need more wide receivers, to be honest with you. But thank you for the question. Next question comes from Jeremy Allison, who says, hey, Q, Andrew Berry has done a good job so far. If he takes a prospect that fans don't like, such as a Roseau. Should we trust an AB or criticize the move? Feel free to criticize the move. Nobody is above criticism. Not myself, not Andrew Berry, nobody. I have my critiques of him as a prospect, and if he drafts him in the first round, I would think, that's a reach. That's a reach for a player that I don't see that much of a need for. I would not like the pick. You are free to criticize. Look, it might work out, but, just because it might work out or just because you trust Andrew Berry does not mean that Andrew Berry is not above making mistakes. And, if you feel like he made a mistake, be fair in your criticism, right? Like, I have fair reasons to be critical of Gregory Roseau, and I have gone through them multiple times on this channel. Be fair with your criticism, but, give the criticism. Nobody is above criticism, right? Like, nobody is above criticism. Not Andrew Berry, not Baker Mayfield, nobody. So yeah, if he makes a pick I don't like, I'm going to be critical of it, and you should be too. If you don't like the pick, be critical for good reasons. I hate when people are critical for bad reasons, like Devonta Smith, right? People are critical of him because he's light and they're worried he might get injured, but that's all hypothetical. He played 47 games in the SEC without getting injured. You don't know if he's going to have an injury problem, but people are worried about it. That's not a good reason to be critical of a pick, but there are multiple good reasons to be critical of any pick. So yeah, if he makes a pick you don't like, have a good reason, make a actual argument, have some things that are actual facts, maybe some tape behind why you don't feel that this was a great pick. Make your case, because yes, nobody is above criticism. But please, if you're going to be critical of it, just make sure for better or worse, you kind of know somewhat of what you're talking about, and you have reasons, real reasons, not like, oh, I don't like his attitude, or, like hypothetical kind of intangible reasons. Have like actual reasons for why you don't like the pick. That's just what I ask of being critical of anybody, to be honest with you. That you have actual reasons and that you're fair with your criticism. Last question of the day comes from Sean Ballantyne, who says, what's with the hype of wanting a corner so badly? Is the front seven not in need of more help than the back four? The issue with the back four is that you got a lot of guys who are injured. Well, not the back four, the secondary, is that you have a lot of guys who just can't stay on the field. And when you have that, you need guys to be able to step in and have that depth. And look, we can make all the arguments that we want here, but one of the realities is that the Browns really had an issue stopping the Steelers offense, even when they were up big in that game, right? You talk about like Claypool was an issue because we had Robert Jackson on him, right? The injuries that this defense had, especially in the secondary position, they're not things that you could just feel good about not happening. Denzel Ward has an injury history. We know Greedy got an injury history. Grant got an injury history. A lot of these guys in the secondary have a injury history. So if that's the case and you want to keep those guys on the field, you have to build depth around it. The thing on the other part of the field that you mentioned, right, the front seven, is that they got Myles Garrett. And Myles Garrett don't got an injury history. And Myles Garrett is like defensive player of the year caliber good. Like Denzel Ward's really good. He ain't winning defensive player of the year. Myles Garrett could win defensive player of the year. So when you have that kind of an anchor in your front seven, it makes the needs there much less drastic, because you know that you can get away with having guys who aren't necessarily as talented as Myles, because Myles is going to take a ton of attention, right? You can have role players around Myles and you'll live in the front seven, but you don't have such a luxury with the secondary, which is why I think the need is more drastic in the secondary. And again, a lot of this team, right, blowing leads, right? A lot of that was because they just did not feel confident in their secondary and the depth that they had in their secondary. So, yeah, I do agree with the consensus that the secondary has been a bigger issue than the defensive line, especially now that they have signed Clowney, that they signed Takk McKinley, and that they've done these things. But thank you again for the question. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.